Good morning. It's a blustery day. So today's talk is called Need I Say More? And so our topic for the month, or your topic for the month, is gratitude. So I've been doing a lot of thought about gratitude, and a lot of thought this week on sort of contrast. And in one of my blog posts this week, I told this story about Sister Camilla. And since I picked up this Teacher's Rule mug this morning downstairs, I want to share with you one of my very earliest experiences with this idea of contrast. And this was in the 4th grade, and I went to St. Mary's Catholic Elementary School, and I had a teacher, and her name was Sister Camilla. Now, Sister Camilla was about this big, and she had round gold glasses and bright shining eyes, and she just loved me. She used to grab my grandmother at St. Mary's Church on Sundays, and they'd walk on arm in arm down the aisle, and she'd just say what a great pupil I was, and she would tell my grandmother that one day I was going to be a priest. So one day in 4th grade class with my 4th grade classmates, we were sitting around, and Sister Camilla had this little brass bell on her desk that she would ring, which signaled that there was some very important announcement that was about to be made. And she stood up and she rang her little brass bell, and she said, "Class, I would like to have your attention." And she said, "Now it's time for a desk check." Now, I did not know what a desk check was. I guess some people knew what it was. I did not know what it was. We had those old-fashioned kind of one-piece desks with the little wooden chair and the flip-top lids. And so let me just say a little bit about myself. I am a collector. I like to collect things. I like to sock away bits of information and things that are special to me. And at that time, I was collecting things as well in my desk. I had my papers that were there for class, of course, some marbles, some baseball cards, probably a pop-top necklace that I made. Various items, scraps of paper I may have thought that were important. All of these things I thought were something that I absolutely would need at some point later in the future. So Sister Camilla proceeds to walk through the class and ask people to raise the lids of their desk, and she sort of poked around and shuffled around in there, and she'd move on to the next one. Well, she got to me. And of course, I think nothing could possibly go wrong because, after all, I'm her favorite pupil and I'm going to be a priest someday. So I open my desk and I see her face turn bright red and her eyes bulge out and her eyebrows that she had penciled on sort of like raise. In this expression of horror. And so I was still going with my favorite pupil, going to be a priest someday thing, and I smiled up at her and thought this is going to be okay, at which point she said, "Scott, get up and step away from your desk." Which I did, and I'm still holding on. So then she squatted down with her little frame, and she grabbed the edge of my desk and she just lifted it up and pushed it all the way across the room. Papers, pens or crayons, marbles, baseball cards, pop-top necklaces, whatever it is was in there, all over the floor. And just then I threw up a little, and then she turned heel with her blue habit swirling and said, "Clean it up. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Let that be a lesson." And off she went. So I was left there to sort of collect my things and put them back in my desk, and I guess my lesson was learned. But what I did learn in that instant was I would suppose you could call it humiliation, right? But in that humiliation, in that sort of like sudden change, sudden unexpected, and to me inexplicable change in circumstance, I also learned contrast. I learned contrast as it relates to my being. Now, and you thought we'd like to focus on the positivity, and I think that's great. And I don't know if any of you have looked at this new book. It's called The Motivation Manifesto. Anybody? You? Okay. I was flipping through it the other day, and I found this passage, and it's called The Path of Gratitude. And I'm going to share it with you. It says, "To the attuned and grateful, the cascade of the universe's blessings feels like a magnificent waterfall of luck and wonder. In searching for things to be grateful for, we need not look far. One must simply release the ego, let down the persona that feels it has created all things or must perfect all things, and accept the natural, the unexplainable, the energy that has graced us with vitality and a world of magic. A vibrant and happy life begins at the path of gratitude." Now, that's great. No, really, it is. Because I had flipped back through some of my other writings, and I have a particular other note post that I wrote on Thanksgiving, which is very similar to this. You know, I'm going to focus on, I'm going to release. But this is the part that you know, I think being in this for years, one must simply release the ego. Okay, I don't know that it's that simple. I really don't. I mean, I appreciate this, and I think it's great for sort of inspiring us, but I also fear sometimes that we're getting into sort of an conspiracy theory, kind of like a conspiracy theory, but the opposite. Like, we're just in this place where we're convinced that everything is inspiring for us, and while we do know that's the case, it doesn't feel like that's the case all the time. Now, when I visit other churches, occasionally I'll talk about things like this, try to sort of bring in some real-life issues, and I shared with the chaplain class today that I become an idealist, which is an idealist and a realist sort of come together, right? Because I loved being an idealist, I do. New Thought is great, we're great idealists, but at the same time, there's always this nagging part of ourselves that's the realist. And you know what? I'm just tired of ignoring that part of myself that wants to tell me otherwise. Now, one of my other blog posts this week, and this isn't an advertisement for my blog at www.reverendScottDemarco.com, but anyway, one of my other blog posts this week was called Unsuck It. And the point of Unsuck It basically is that we have these things in our lives that we have to deal with, and they suck, so to speak. And so it's about taking action and sort of realizing that these things exist, realizing the contrast, realizing that they're there, and then taking steps to move forward. Okay, so that's the realist part of the idealist that I have grown to be. So while we have all of these wonderful things, we also need to, I guess, find the joy in the irony in a way. I always think of Mama Rose in Gypsy when she comes out and does Everything's Coming Up Roses, right? You know, she's like, everything's coming up roses. And there's a huge irony in that moment, right? A huge irony that she's on face value sort of espousing this great litany of positivity, while at the same time, life's a disaster. But there's something to be learned there. There's there's lessons in the contrast of our lives. So I want to share with you, because I love to share definitions. Contrast. So to set in opposition in order to show or emphasize differences. I love this one. To evince a difference that can distinguish meaning. To evince a difference that can distinguish meaning. That is contrast. So to evince a difference that can distinguish meaning. And I think one of the other interesting things is I started sort of thinking about this artistically, you know, sort of the contrast in art between light and dark, these things that exist, and also then about sculpture and relief and all that kind of thing. So if you look up the definition of relief, one of the definitions there is a vibrant expression as a result of contrast. Okay, so we've got contrast and we've got relief. And relief to us, obviously, is this sort of release of the pains and anxieties and agonies and whatever it is, whatever else it is that we're experiencing. So I guess what I'm getting at is, as we move into this sort of season of Thanksgiving, I don't ever want to advise that we focus on the things that we're not grateful for, but that we sort of include these contrasts into our place of Thanksgiving. So yesterday, again, I was sharing with the chaplain class about vision, okay? I and you, without infrared glasses, are blind in total darkness. We are equally as blind in total light. If we are in a place of absolute white light or just absolute light, we can't see because there is no contrast. There are no shadows. So without the shadows, we can't see anything. We have no perspective. We have no depth. We have no relief. We have no contrast. So these things are necessary. And they're necessary at the same time they're uncomfortable. Now, one of the things we also do is we look around and we experience the world and we read the news reports and we think, oh my God, there's so much happening. Has there ever been as much happening as there is today? Has there ever been as many things, crazy things going on? I mean, you know, just terrible sort of things in the Middle East and even within our country, this sort of guy that was on the run that was caught, and the thing happening in the school up in Washington, and just a lot of things, But one of the things we have to think about when it comes to all these things that are sort of showing up in our world is that part of our conscious evolution and part of the way life experience and reality works is that contrast must exist. It must exist. So the more we sort of see these things that are almost sort of spiraling out of control and spiraling into unbelievability, I want to assure you that there is a corresponding consciousness that's evolving as a result, or vice versa. It's a chicken-egg argument. That consciousness is evolving, and therefore that which is unlike it is coming into manifestation or expression. So the good news is we are growing. We are growing as a humankind. And as students of New Thought and people who come here to celebrate the joy, it's our decision to remain firmly seated in that contrast, but seeing the contrast for what it is, seeing it as a lesson to be learned, looking at Sister Camilla as a teacher of sorts for me, as years later I have not changed one bit, and my basement is full of scraps of paper and pop-top necklaces and marbles and baseball cards of sorts. They are there for me because I enjoy keeping things. It's just who I am. So all of these things are really pushing us and leading us to our perception of our ideal self. And what is our ideal self? Our ideal self is the most authentic part of ourselves. This thing that we were brought here to be, this thing that we're brought here to do, this thing that allows us to sort of get all these things out of our way, sort of get all of these drags out of our way. So I just went through the experience of Halloween, going to a Halloween party, and it's amazing, adults. I love adults at Halloween. I mean, it's just adult Halloween parties, people get so into it. They really do. I don't know why I dread it until I start to put the costume on, then I'm really into it. But anyway, they get there, and people just have gone all out to assume this disguise, this alternate identity, because I think it's fun, right? It's fun to pretend for a minute you're something or someone else, put on this sort of drag. And that's really what it is. I mean, I look at my brother-in-law with his sort of Harley-Davidson gear, and one day I was telling him, I said, all this that you have going on, biker drag. It's drag. It's just another drag. It's another, it is. Yeah, it's another way of sort of assuming another identity or an or maybe plugging into a piece of yourself that you want to present to the world with freedom and expression and sort of sing out and be this thing that you really are. So we all have these drags, and drags are good if they're put to good use. They really are. For us to sort of assume our identities. If there's any actors, artists, this is great for actors, painters, musicians. We all have these drags. It's these things that we sort of put on so that we can express ourselves and be who we really are. Because those are personas that we step into, right, to emphasize the contrast in our life. So part of embracing the contrast is to be these things that you are. Allow yourself to shine. Allow your sort of alternate personality to accent this ideal self, because all of these things are delivered to us for a reason. And I know that's so easy to say. It's just like the thing I just read. We simply need to release the ego. We simply need to change our perception. All of that is true. And sometimes we can't find absolute meaning in those sort of deliverances of contrast. I don't think I could find an immediate meaning in the deliverance of my contents of my desk to the floor of my fourth grade classroom. I don't think that could have made any sense to me at the time. But I do think that that the contrast is necessary. We can't live without it. And my MacBook Air screen, which is it's like my whoopee. I carry this thing everywhere. It is now completely white. White. Every pixel's on. It's completely white. Now, I'm convinced that behind that whiteness, it still knows what it's doing, because I'm holding on to hope that when I take it to the genius at the Genius Bar, he's going to be able to fix it. So I'm typing as if it's going to change. I'm typing in my password and pressing enter. Nothing's happening. So I decided that it had to happen this weekend because it had to drive home my message of contrast. So I just want you to know that I learned a really, really hard lesson just for you for this message today, so I could share that with you. So as we move into this season of gratitude, as we move into this season of joy, as we move into this season where we have all of these things, where we have more and more and more things, and it's one of the things that I think I love, and I do love about the season of Thanksgiving into the fall and into Christmas and into the new year. There's so much more that sort of happens, right? We sit down to a Thanksgiving dinner where there's more. We eat too much in my family. We eat too much, and then we end up on the floor of the living room, passed out. Maybe it's because I'm Midwestern, I don't know. But there's just a lot more of everything. We drag out those decorations, if you're a decorator, decorate our houses more. We go out to shop for gifts because it's very necessary that we find more things to give to people so that they end up in my basement for people like me, because I'm absolutely certain that someday I will need those things. And even the white elephant thing doesn't work for me, because I'm unwilling to give up anything that's down there to rewrap and give to somebody else, so I'll end up buying something new. But anyway, more. And I just want you to remember during this time that our gratitude lies not in these things that we acquire that are new for us, but in the contrasts that we have in our life. What are those new things bringing to us that contrast with who we are? What is it teaching us? Can we use the contrast as a gift? Can we use the contrast as a gift? I've sort of made a resolution this holiday season that I am going to use my contrast to bless. Whether that's writing or drawing or creating, I'm going to use this creation as a gift. Not run out to buy something, not run out to buy my sister-in-law new kitchen towels, but maybe write about the contrast in my life or the contrast in our relationship and what it's brought to me. So we use these gifts and we value them in this season of more. And I needn't say more about who you are, what this has taught you, this authenticity that Spirit brings to you as a result of this contrast. And I wish you the greatest blessings as we enter this season. And I want you to know how grateful I am for you in the spiritual community and the opportunity to come here. So thank you.